Welcome to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur podcast. I am your host, Kayleigh Greenacre, a business strategist, coach, TEDx speaker, author, and your go-to woman for all things business strategy. I am obsessed with supporting female entrepreneurs to grow unstoppable six and multi-six-figure businesses that they love, giving them the freedom and life that they desire. During this podcast, I'll be sharing with you everything that you need to become a successful female entrepreneur, from the mindset shifts to sales and marketing strategies, and how to become an iconic leader that people can't get enough of. It is my mission to help you stand out, attract your dream clients and customers, and sell out of your offers with ease whilst building the business and life of your dreams. Let's make this your reality, ladies. Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of Actually I Can, the Female Entrepreneur podcast. I am your host, Kayleigh Greenacre, and I am joined today by the fabulous Megan, who is a mindset and business coach. And in this episode, we're going to be diving into the subconscious identities and mindset that can hold us back or catapult us forwards in our business. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, Megan. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Oh my God, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, thank you, my lovely. So for our listeners, it'll be really, really good for you to, I've done a little bit of an introduction, but it'll be good for them to find out a little bit about you and your journey as a business entrepreneur.
Yeah, so I call myself a mindset and business coach. I really am obsessed with the subconscious mind, subconscious identities, and how that can really play a role in how we show up in our business, and really about identifying the unique selling point, that unique perspective, that inner wisdom that we have within us, bringing that forward so that we can really stand out to our dream audience, our dream clients in this online space. So I actually have a decade-long experience in sales for traditional like tech startups. And then I moved to Thailand in 2019. And my whole life took a different trajectory. So that's when I started my business, and I was really finding my way. I just dived into the personal development world. I did all of the healing work, all of the spiritual work, and that's when I really understood about subconscious mind and mindset, and all of these things that I had never really kind of understood or grasped before. And then obviously we know what happened in 2020. I came back to the UK. I had to go back into my old flat. I had to go back into a job because my business wasn't really making any money at this point. And then in 2021, I have to get my dates right. I discovered that I was pregnant, and this was what I always call it with my clients. It was my metaphorical crossroads where I was like, okay, am I committed to this? Like, this has not been working. This is a flailing business at this stage. Am I committed to this, or do I just give it up? And you know what that first trimester is like. It's a mind-boggling moment. And I really struggled in the first 3 months. And I decided when I came out of that 3 months, I was like, I'm going to work on me. Like, so I'd thrown so much into the business. I'd thrown so much into all of these things outside of me. And I was like, I just need to change who I am. That led me onto the subconscious identity work that I do now. And in my third trimester, my life fell apart, but my business started to take off. And then after my son was born, that's when my business really, really catapulted in 2022, which was incredible because I was sat there at the beginning of the year when I was 7 months pregnant, like, how is this ever going to work when I've got a baby? And then, you know, it felt like despite all the odds, I really transformed my internal reality, and that's what changed my external reality. And so yeah, that's kind of my background and what brought me here. And for the last couple of years, I've really been helping, I think, because my background in tech startups was so focused on that USPs, like really bringing that element into it, but I bring a lot of the stories, the excuses that hold us back and keep, I think especially women, we can play very small with how incredible we actually are. So it's really about peeling back those layers and uncovering that magic inside of you.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. So let's dive into this a little bit more. Now, we know, both you and I, we're both very passionate, aren't we, in terms of mindset. And I think it's so easy to assume when you start a business that we've got to focus on, the building blocks, the foundations, which we do have to do, the strategy, the selling, the marketing, all of those things. But ultimately, a massive part of any female entrepreneur success is also their mindset. And it's that kind of, again, it links to that self-development journey. So let's just kind of dive into that a little bit first. Why is it important that we should invest not only in the strategy side of things, but obviously in our mindset as well?
Yeah, well, I think ultimately, and maybe you found this, the strategy is 100% important. I'm never going to be on the is it mindset or strategy. It's always strategy is important. Being able to do the thing is important. But ultimately, you get to the stage where the strategy, the actual things that you have to do, they can be quite simple. And I think at the levels that we're often talking about, it is actually simple action to take, but what gets in the way is our mindset. It's our, so I really work with the identity. It's the subconscious identity that we're operating from. The story that I've seen many female entrepreneurs say is like they're not operating as a business owner, they're not operating as a successful person. And they have a lot of stories that come up in parallel to that. And this stops you taking action. It creates procrastination. Your brain will scientifically search for evidence that the stories are true. So you're going to see things like, not enough people are watching my stories. No one in my audience wants to buy. People won't pay me if I charge this amount. We see evidence from these stories because it's based on your perception. And so the strategy is important, but ultimately, if you've been investing over and over again in different strategies and you're not seeing the results, at what point do you look at the common denominator, which is yourself, and realize, and this is the journey that I went on, which is why I say it, is at what point do you look at yourself and realize actually the change has to happen inside of me first. And that's really where I got to. So I think, and then of course at different levels, and I've had different iterations of this, I'm sure you have as well. It's not just once you start getting the clients coming in and hitting those high cash months, whatever they are for you, like that's when the mindset work's even more important, because then you're challenging your unconscious identity. You're challenging the paradigms that you've previously lived in, especially if you come from corporate or you've never done something like this before. You're the first person in your family who's started a business. Like, you're challenging internal paradigms, and that creates a whole load of what we call an ego death. So your part of you is dying, part of you is no longer valid because of the life that you're creating, and it stirs up a lot of emotions. So mindset work is always going to be the thing. It's always the thing I come back to. Every entrepreneur I've spoken to is like, it's the mind. The brain gets in the way. You're limitless. You are capable of everything that you want, but your brain is telling you that you're not, to keep you safe. And so it always, for me, comes back to this work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can see. And, it's so valuable, isn't it, to obviously do this work. And like you said, you're investing in both strategy and mindset, but there's so much there. And like you said, the subconscious mind. So let's kind of dive into this a little bit, in regards to excuses. What excuses do you think hold people back from reaching their next level? Because I think no matter where they are on their journey, we're always wanting to get to that next level. So what excuses do you think hold them back?
Yeah, I think, and I love that what you said about the next level. Someone would describe this to me recently, and I think it's so true before I go into that, which is like, we're playing, when you're an entrepreneur and you're creating these businesses, there is no end game. Like, we all like to think there's an end game, but when you reach that next goal, you move the goalpost. So it's an infinite game, really. And so we have to create these kind of games within that, which is the different goals that we have. But so this is where excuses come up. And this is where as well your subconscious can be really sneaky. So if you are somebody who's done the work and you've done mindset work, at the beginning, you might notice things like, so I had this really funny story when I first started my business, when I first started my Instagram account, which was, I cannot do face to cam talking on my phone like the influencers do until I have 1,000 followers, which is just this mind-boggling. Where did that story come from? But that was a story that I honestly live by. I was like, once I get to 1,000 followers, I can speak to my camera. Now, I don't think everyone has that story, but then your excuses change, and I think they start getting really sneaky. So at the beginning, it might be things like, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, the kind of common ones that we see.
Time, yeah.
I am a single parent. I know that you've been through that as well.
Mm.
And it's a validating story. You know, I think sometimes people we share, I'm going to quote excuse, and someone will listen and be like, yeah, but that's my reality. That is real. And it is true. There is less time, but it doesn't mean it's not possible. It's just, can you be more creative with it? So I always think that's one that comes up, but then your subconscious mind gets really sneaky, especially when you do this work often. So it might change from, oh, we can't do that, we don't know how to do that, we might be judged if we do that, into, oh, I don't really need that. I don't really need to have that many people in my coaching spaces. I don't really need that much money. I don't need to go viral. And we almost like um gaslight ourselves into what we really desire, and that's actually your subconscious mind creating a limitation. And that's the sneakiest excuse I see, especially when entrepreneurs are growing, because they start to see some success and then that sneaky saboteur will come in with, no, you don't need that much, you should be happy, you should be grateful with what you've got. I think that's the sneakiest one. So yeah, I see the I don't have enough time, I don't have the resources, and I think they're all ones that we can always work through consciously. But those excuses where it's about, do I really need this, or am I being too much? They're the sneaky ones that can really hold people back.
So I want to touch on the time one actually, because I feel like this is something that probably a number of listeners may well experience or again, feel at some point in their journey. And I know I've had a lot of conversations with different female entrepreneurs where actually one of their biggest limiting beliefs is time. They do not have enough time to create content or enough time to do X, Y, and Z. So what advice would you give people that, struggle with, let's say, time, if we use that as an example?
Yeah. So to give a background on why I feel like I can talk about this, my business took off when I had just had my son. I was previously working for a company before that. I was like, how am I ever going to make this work when I haven't been able to make it work when I'm working full time without a baby? I had my son in March. I went back to work, kind of started going on my Instagram account, and essentially I didn't sell for 2 months, and then I started selling again end of April, beginning of May, and that's when things really grew. With a newborn baby who did not sleep, who had reflux. I had a dog that's very needy. If you've had a dog, dogs are needy. They actually do take a lot of time. My husband at the time worked shifts, and he would work one day on the weekend. I had a day and a half where I would have help, where I would work on my business. And in November of that year, when my son was 7 months old, we actually separated. So then I was single parenting, and that's when I started to hit the 5-figure months stage. So I get it. First of all, I get it. And now I have a toddler, which seems even more like time juggling. So that's why I wanted to say I do get it. And what really helps me, especially when it comes to things like, for me, a lot of the time it's because people have a idea or a interpretation or perception of how it's meant to look. So they think creating content has to look, they might be, slightly more perfectionist than someone like me, where, I want to make sure that the graphics are great. I need to have like all these great photos of me. It needs to look put together, which is great and incredible. But if that is going to limit you, it's actually not a prerequisite for you earning money in your business. The main thing is solving a problem for people and being clear on that. So a lot of the time you have to change the story of how it actually gets to look. Something that really helped me, especially being in the thick of it, was I looked at something like content creation, for example, as more like documentation. So I would take pictures of my lifestyle and they would be messy, and that was part of my brand. I remember I launched a program called Unapologetic with baby sick on me because he had reflux and he was sick all of the time. And part of me was like, oh my God, this is awful. A big thing I do is spinning it. So I was like, actually, of course, my baby would be sick on me when I'm about to launch Unapologetic, doing a little face to cam Instagram thing. And I was like, that's the point. That's the point of Unapologetic. It is that, you don't have to be put together and perfect, and these ideas that you might have. So there's obviously strategies around this, but for me, I'm going to come at it from the mindset perspective, is like, what stories and stipulations are you putting on around it? It should look a certain way. I have to do it this way. And what if the story you told yourself was like, how could this get to be as easy as possible for me in my season of life, especially if you are a single mother, for example, which was my experience. Is I didn't have the time to always be in Canva. A lot of my, or I just made the simplest design ever that I knew I could edit. And asking for help is the other thing from being a single mother. I got the dog walked. At one point I ordered, I got meals delivered. So I got my breakfast, lunch, and like a meal delivery service. So I outsourced things like that were taking up my time. So I was like, my time is best spent on my own personal development, my own well-being, my clients, and my business. So I think there are obviously strategies and tools around it of getting really focused. But for me, when it's a time thing, clarity is the easiest way to get over this. Because if you're spending time, I'm not sure who I'm speaking to, I'm not sure what kind of content I should create, I'm not sure what my offers are. If you create clarity around all of this, I always say to my clients, you should be able to create content on your skill, knowledge, niche thing, whatever, on a bad day. If you don't need to be inspired to create a bit of educational content on something, you know you're in your zone of genius. You shouldn't have to feel activated and inspired in order to create content every day. I see that story a lot as well.
Oh, I love this. And I bet you've come across a number of different clients or fabulous female entrepreneurs that are, again, telling themselves stories. I mean, what other stories have you come across from people that you've supported and helped? Have you got any other examples that you could share with us?
Oh, yeah. I think motherhood comes up a lot.
Yes, yeah.
And the other thing, of course, which I've experienced is it come up in something like a breakup, something like a big house move, a big personal life situation. I always say life is gonna life, and that can really throw somebody, and it's really challenging. I had a conversation with someone the other day about this. Like, it's really hard when a person life challenge comes up, because it is a validating story. If you told people about, I'm going through a breakup, or I have a health, I had some health issues last year throughout growing my business, and nothing major, but I was in hospital a couple of times and things like that. And not to the point of burnout, of course, like have there's nuances of it, of course, but I think also recognizing, like, life happens, life is gonna life, things are gonna happen. And I think that they're often things that you tell your family and friends about it, they're gonna be like, of course you can't do what you normally do, of course you can't work, of course you have to slow down on your business, of course. And it's like, well, yes, but what if you just looked at it a different way? What if you just looked at it? So my health things last year were like, and obviously growing a toddler, and a toddler being way more demanding than a baby, is like, how can I actually create my business in a way that supports my season of life? So I've had a lot of clients that have gone through breakups. They might have careers that they really love outside of their, so whether it's a job or just a career, like I've had a couple of creatives and performers um who travel a lot for their work. So that can come up in terms of time, but also feeling quite split in terms of their focus and attention. And they're all real stories. They're all real validating reasons why it might be harder. But for me, it's just how do you choose to let this define you in a positive instead of like hold you back?
Nice. I love this. I love the fact as well that you're touching on both being a mum, and obviously, different situations, different circumstances that people might face, such as sort of split up or, breaking up with partners and things. And I feel, these are things obviously that are in their personal life that obviously are then, they're allowing them to affect their journey, their success in terms of business. And as you're saying that, again, sort of me being a mum as well, and for those of you that are listening that are also mums or mumpreneurs, as we would say, it can be really, really challenging, can't it, in terms of you're spinning so many different plates, and you're trying to be the best mum that you can, but you're also growing a business, you're trying to be there for your clients. And one thing that I used to notice for myself when I started this business is, I'm a mum, single mum, I'm starting a business. I was also working full-time as assistant head teacher as well. But then I was looking at people and comparing myself to other people who were not mums, who were not also working full time, who had a business, who were absolutely smashing it, and credit and hands up to them. I was comparing myself to them. And what a mistake that was, because it put me in this kind of cycle or kind of mindset trap, I suppose, in the sense of, oh, I'm never going to be as good as them because I'm a mum and because I'm working full time. And I had to do an awful lot of work on myself in terms of my mindset, thinking, well, no, my life is different. My journey is different. And I'm doing this for my daughter, so that I can spend more time with her, have more freedom, etc. So have you got any advice around that in terms of like the comparison side of things? Because again, I think that's a story that a lot of us at some point have told ourselves.
Oh my God, 100%. That was exactly where I got to at the end of 2022. And I got into the same thing. I was like, no, these other people, no one else that I knew that was in the mastermind or the coaches, they weren't, if they were mums, and then my story, my victim mindset would be like, they have husbands or partners that are there all the time. And your brain does this, your brain will fit in. Your brain wants to close the loop. So when it sees something, this is the terrible thing about comparison, is we obviously only see a highlight reel online. And so we fill in the gaps around it. That's why that person can have success and I can't. Again, this is stories your brain is creating. It's actually keeping you trapped in limitations. You end up fighting for your limitations. So I think the awareness, first of all, that you're in that trap, because again, it can be sneaky. And then it's, what is a more supportive story I can tell myself? And this sounds so simple. People are so quick to just be like, well, that's silly. But what the thing that happens psychologically when you choose the new story is you open yourself up to a different level of thinking where solutions can be found. That's actually where I started the mantra, my business gets to support me in my season of life, because I was in a mastermind, I had a coach, and she was incredible, but yeah, did not have the responsibilities that I had and the time constraints. And it is different. We say Beyonce has the same 24 hours in the day, but you don't. If you don't have the help from other people, you don't. But for me, it was like, okay, I get to have that, but my journey and the way it looks is going to be different. And I have to think creatively around how that gets to look. So rather than they have that, I don't have that, it can't happen. It's like, oh, they're doing it that way. How could it get to look for me? What would it look like in my perfect scenario? And then you're asking your brain the right question. You're asking your brain, you're coming up with a creative solution to a problem rather than being fixated on the problem and how unfair life is, which we've all been there.
Absolutely. That's great advice. So the advice you would give people then, in terms of if they're experiencing, whether it is comparison, whether it's time, whether it's money and investment, whether it's being a mum, so you're saying ultimately that, is it to try and reframe and really kind of spin that story on its head and ultimately see the positive, see the, how can we, how can I learn, not how can I learn from this, sorry, how can I reframe it in order to support myself in moving forwards? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So the first thing is obviously awareness, recognize that, right, I'm in comparison right now. So I always like to identify the story. So everything we tell ourselves is a story. It's all a story. There are very few truths in the world, meaning 100% true 100% of the time. So we see, this was a story that this is kind of anchored in for me when I was pregnant. So I was just consuming a lot without really caring. I wasn't in comparison, so I was like having a baby. So I was like, right, all of these women, because I was focused on women, have created businesses and they've all done it in a different way, and they all have different offers, and they all have a different story, and they all have a different background. So how could it be that there's only one way to create a successful business? There's not. So that was a real just like eye opener for me. So then it's like, okay, so if you're going through this, if you're in comparison or you're feeling a bit stuck, I close my eyes when I'm trying to think about how to say things. It's like, okay, what story am I creating for myself here? And just by telling yourself it's a story, it's like your subconscious is like, oh, this isn't true. It just gives that subconscious an opening that, oh, this isn't a truth. So let's say a really simple way, non-business related, would be like, let's say your friend doesn't text you back when she normally texts you back, and you're like, oh, she's annoyed with me. And that's like where your brain will go to. It's like, let's say in business, right, I haven't, my business isn't making the money I want it to make, right? My business isn't hit 5K months right now. I'm a failure, I'm this, I'm that. What could be another story? What could be another option? Oh, I'm being invited to lean deeper into like my way of doing things. I haven't found a creative solution to how, like, where's a skill I can refine? And then you're going into, that's cool. That's cool if you've got a skill that you need to refine. Then you know where you need to focus and upskill yourself and learn. Or where is my confidence dipped? Like, where can I do something to increase my confidence outside of business? Like, so you're just going into like, what's the story I'm telling myself about this? And then a good exercise is like, what could be 5 other stories that I could tell myself that are more positive? So let's say there are people in my audience right now who are wanting to work with me and they are trying to find the resources right now. Like, you don't know that that's not true. It's just a more positive, it's not like gaslighting because we want to recognize the story, but it's just shifting the attention and awareness. And then how differently might you show up from that energy, from that space, if you had that belief? If you thought there are people in my audience right now who want to work with me, they're trying to find the resources, they might be messaging me at any moment, how would you show up differently? Because a lot of the time people would.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing that inner work and really questioning yourself in terms of that. Like you said, how would you show up differently? What would you say then? So, in regards to these stories that we all tell ourselves, what would you say the impact is on our success? Because ultimately, as female entrepreneurs, we're here to build successful businesses, to grow, to scale, etc. What impact do you ultimately believe that these stories that we tell ourselves have on our success?
I'm a huge believer in how the stories impact everything, because this was some of the work that I did right before my business took off.
Mm.
I was telling myself all of these victim stories. Like, it's so hard for me. I was in full victim mode in 2021, especially with everything happening and then getting pregnant, lockdowns, all of this stuff. I hated being in the UK. I hated being back in my flat. I hated my job. I was in full victim. Some of the biggest work I did on myself was changing the stories. I did that through hypnotherapy. I did that through self-talk. Like, there's actual methods through self-talk.
Yes, yeah.
And the impact for me was, well, I had, that was my success story, was I changed the stories I was telling myself and I changed my reality. I don't know, maybe you can outwork it, but I think it would take a huge amount of effort and hard work if you're constantly telling yourself this isn't going to work for me. Like, you might see success, and I think there probably are people who have a super negative mindset, but they will have to work 10 times harder to potentially get that success. And then they might potentially, I think we hear a lot of the times, you've probably come across this, where people will have success and then it drops off because they can't sustain it. They don't know how to hold it because unconsciously they just feel uncomfortable holding that amount of money. But ultimately, like, it's going to be 10 times harder for you to create success, or if you do it, and harder to maintain if you're constantly telling yourself that it's going to be hard, because you're working, it's like having your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time.
Mm.
Your mindset is what powers you. I'm quite a spiritual background, so how I always think of it is, when we are in tune with, like, I don't talk about alignment in feeling like nothing should feel, it's not going to feel good all of the time. I don't believe that. In alignment does not mean it feels good all of the time, in my opinion. But it does mean when you are working congruently, meaning your unconscious beliefs and your actions marry up. So if you believe you're a successful person, your actions are going to be in congruency with that. Congruent with that. Um, it's like it opens up that consciousness. That, have you ever been in that flow, like the flow of creativity? Things just feel easy when I'm on coaching calls and things like this. Like, I feel like I'm in that flow, and I feel like it's because my subconscious mind and my conscious mind they're working better together. Whereas if they're like not working so well together, it's like they're two rocks pushing against each other. That's how I would describe it in a metaphorical sense. So I feel like it can really slow you down if you're working with those kind of stories and excuses, or whatever they are.
Amazing. Thank you so much, my lovely. So, what would we say then, or what's the one piece of advice that you would give our fabulous listeners, female entrepreneurs today, in regards to these stories that they're potentially telling themselves, or the mindset work?
I have really good exercise, which is look at your external reality right now. So whether that is, let's do this in business, that's mainly female entrepreneurs, like looking at your business right now, look at the evidence you have, the 3D reality that you're experiencing. So how many clients you have, the money you're making, how many people, all of the things that you look at. And then looking at that, write down what are the beliefs or stories that person would have to have for that to be true. This is going to give you an indication of your unconscious story. So let's say, for example, like things are really inconsistent. They're up 1 month, down the other. Like there's no consistency. I don't know where the next client's coming from. I feel like this is a really common reality. It feels lucky if I make a sale. So if you write that down, the beliefs are going to be like, I can't hold more than one client. I don't know how to create consistency. I'm not good enough to hold that many clients. Like you can write all of these beliefs down. Then you're seeing what you're actually working from, whether you think it consciously or not. They're going to be your unconscious beliefs and stories. And then all you need to do is I would write them down on like one side of the A4 page. And then on the other side, what is the flip side story? What's the opposite of that story that you want to be experiencing? This is the simple part, which just it sounds too easy, so people won't do it. Don't be like those people who don't do it. If you do this, you will see a difference. As soon as because you're now conscious of these beliefs and thoughts because you've brought them into conscious awareness, when you notice them, you've got your thought shifter. So like, oh, I've noticed that thought. That's an old thought. So the word old, so your subconscious knows this is my new story. This is the story I'm working from now. And you give your energy and attention to that thought, and that's going to create a new neural pathway. It's going to open up the creativity, the energy, the action and the behavior, because you're working from that identity that you need to take in order to see a different outcome.
Oh, amazing. Such great advice, and obviously an exercise that everyone can go away and give this a go. So please do take note of this, ladies. It's going to 100% help you, especially if you've got any stories that you feel are kind of holding you back in terms of limiting beliefs. So I ask every guest on my podcast this final question. What is, and I think you touched on your mantra earlier anyway, but what is your word or mantra for this year?
So my word is kind of 2 words, but this year is personal power. I've had a very tumultuous couple of years, and this is the year I was like, I'm taking back a bit of control because there's been so much change in my life. Some positive, some not so positive, and it's been a little bit like I've been along for the ride, which I think I had to be in that season. But this feels like the year I'm claiming it back.
Yeah.
So it's like personal power is kind of like my words. I've cheated a bit. And my mantra I'm having this year is actually, I want to know what you thought it was, but it's I'm a powerful co-creator. So it's really like this identity of being a creator rather than along for the ride, which I've kind of been on for the last couple of years.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Megan. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today's episode as a guest. Where can the fabulous listeners find you and connect with you?
Over on Instagram. So it's I am Megan Rose _. I would love to say hello over there. And thank you so much for having me. It's been such a lovely conversation.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, my lovely. And like I said, the listeners, to all the listeners, please do go and give Megan a follow, say hello, connect with her. And just thank you for joining us for today's episode. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And I will see you all again next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur Podcast with me, your host, Kayleigh Greenacre. If you are ready to build, grow, and scale your dream 6-figure or multi-6-figure business, then head to our website now for more information or connect with me on socials to see how you can create your dream business and dream life.